It's a real pleasure to moderate a session with three old friends of mine. And I think when we conceptualize this panel, including the closing panel by Tong Chai this afternoon, we actually have in mind the state of emergency more as a historical, but also political and theoretical problematic, more than thematic. And as most of you know, the state of emergency have been, how should I say, constitutive or foundational for a lot of our society in Asia or third world, if you wish. One of the examples I'm most familiar with is, of course, Taiwan. And martial law declared for 40 years. Even it's finished by 1987. There is still, at this present day, still there, part of our psychic and subjectivity, even those were the moments certain structure were built, a long-lasting impact, but somehow it's not properly studied. Right? We're all moving in. So it's sort of the history of the present, but it's not properly studied. So that within which, that sort of problematic, we're trying to tackle the issue by inviting three prominent speakers to address the issue together. And with the strong hope, Professor Tong Chai will close with certain, possibility for new research agenda or even political thinking of the issue. Right? I don't want to spend too much time introducing these, friends. Soyoung will speak first. And she's now the director of, chair of the Department of Film Studies, Korean National University of Art. And Soyoung is the leading feminist critic, historian, but also a film director. Soyoung, please.
Thank you very much for organizing this event. And I had a workshop with Hilma and Guangxin in March in Taiwan, and I talked about the states of emergency, still very present in the popular culture. And Hilma thought that this could be an inter-Asian issue, so we kind of evolved from there. And Ben Hua also supported the idea that this could be an inter-Asia issue. So our conversation continues. The Asian countries such as South Korea, Taiwan, India, and Indonesia have been subject to the long reign of states of emergency. Hence, the theoretical and historical interrogations of the states of emergency could be suggested as an inter-Asia issue which can be shared with elsewhere. If we see this issue as inter-Asia or inter-studies in Guangxin's term, we need to tease out the historical and political specificities of the states of emergency in Asian countries, which might claim a disjunctive trajectory from the political theology inflected notions of the states of emergency that Carl Schmitt and Agamben and so on illustrate. I'm wondering how the problematic of a domain of unorganized politics in pathocharys, political society, and Chen Gangxin's ideas of Minjian, and Chua Benghua's notion of management of violence in Asia, and Chu Hee-yeon's participatory democracy of people could redirect us from the notion of the states of emergency sprung from political theology in the West. But for which I need another chapter, today I will present a perilous and curious passage of modernity in suspense through states of emergency and public fantasy. Public fantasy taking an instance of South Korea. I'd like to open my talk with two provocative scenes. One scene belongs to the past of the colonial times and even before, and the other to the present, But first, I will briefly dwell on the notion of openness, 개, to illustrate the historical and epistemological conditions of early modern, which largely responded to this opening to Western and Japanese modernity. What openness matters significantly in relation to the emergent modernity is a period of 개항, opening a port, from 1876 to 1897, and the period of 개화, becoming open, at the time of Enlightenment, from 1897 to 1910, before the annexation. The opening to the world was a highly ambivalent process, to say the least. This opening concocted an immediate sense of emergency and crisis with the slightest bit of suspended hope. Hence, its trajectory is predictably different from the notion of public sphere, Öffentlichkeit, although the assembly of general people in 1897 shares some characteristics of the public sphere. The modern public and public space, as well as popular entertainment like cinema, formed in this trajectory, had to come to terms with the contradictions in this signification of openness. The fear and hope embedded in the openness have haunted the historical sites of Korean culture and cinema, from The Border, which was made in 1922, to the film like Hwanghae, the Yellow Sea, about Chinese-Korean border crossing. This sense of emergency is overlaid with a long political and legal reign of the states of emergency, and presently a kind of entertainment republic where Korean way rules. It might seem odd to see the overdetermined leap of this kind from emergency to entertainment republic. That's what South Korea now stands for. But the critical inquiry of colonial and post-colonial Korean politics and culture requires an understanding of this seemingly incongruous trajectory. Watching the presidential inauguration ceremony of Park Geun-hye, whose electoral success is largely built on her father's dictatorship from 1961 to 1979, I felt a transversal moment of concrete and condensed historicity and Jetztzeit, in Walter Benjamin's word, when Psy performed Gangnam Style for the event. It brings home to my mind the grotesque manifestation of traumatic triumph, which both accumulates and dissipates the layers of historical time. The ghost of Park Chung-hee returns in his daughter, the first female president, with a promise of a second Hangang River miracle after her father's first one. I have written a book called Spectres of Modernity, fantastic Korean cinema in Korean, which dealt with the female ghosts wailing for revenge during 1960s and 70s modernization, but I never imagined a return of a dictator's daughter as the first female president. Even when Psy encouraged everyone to join in his famous horse dance, the authoritarian-looking guests and bureaucrats didn't respond. Sitting in disbelief, but some women and young volunteers joined in. Park represents a legacy of the state of emergency mode that was the rule of her father's presidency. It was a military rule combined with a pseudo-electoral process in the 1970s. Park's daughter is recast in conciliatory form, which Psy's Gangnam Style contributes to. As succinctly outlined in the following, quote, Park Geun-hye's victory, crowning her father's success in last April's election, now sets the stage for a full decade of conservative rule from 2007 through to 2017. More than this, it appears to ensconce the rule of elite that governed the country not just under the Cold War dictatorship, but under the bitter decades of Japanese colonialism that preceded it, unquote. This is from New Left Review. In this conservative re-hegemonizing process, Gangnam Style is a digital refurbishment that this conservative hegemony appropriates. An emergence of the first female president as a strongman's daughter seems firstly to back for a sort of genealogy of female political figures. For this, I will go back to the year of 1895. This is a painting done by Hong Sang-dam, and I will come back to this point, probably in the discussion session. (1895), a threshold moment of modern and pre-modern, as Joseon was declared independence from China, according to the treaty after Sino-Japanese War. The year of 1895, which not only provides the threshold moment of Joseon's entry into international order, as it was granted an independence from China after Sino-Japanese War fought on the Korean soil, but it is also marked by a brutal killing of Empress Min, Myeongseong. She was one of the most influential female political figures over Joseon dynasty. She was assassinated by the Japanese, and this is an act of matricide, as she is remembered as national mother, Kungmo, which eventually set off the capitalist modernity imbricated with and entrenched in Japanese colonialism. I conceived this, by the way, these photos are fakes, so nothing, just kind of still remains a mystery how she looked. She's remembered as national mother, Kungmo, which eventually set off the capitalist modernity, which I just shared with you. I conceive this as a way in which a matrix of the political colonial modernity is constructed. The matricide is incorporated into the fringes of the symbolic law and the constitution of the modern states. She was believed to be burned to ashes as pre-modern female primal evil and counterposed with the modernity of the solar calendar system, as her death was immediately followed by an enforcement of the prohibition of the top-notch and solar calendar. The terms like sovereignty and international appeared in the chronicles of King Gojong, respectively in 1894 and 1895. A notion of the state, kuk, in Chinese character was used as equivalent to country, nara. That's more Korean, vernacular way of saying the state. The kind of the presentiment of violence of modern state. The presentiment is a kind of notion that I will get back to later. Modern state was hanging in the primary scene of the modern. The regime of perversion and violence of matricide not only constitutes the primary sin of the modern, but finds it necessary incessantly being replayed in the scenes of the popular culture and high culture in multitude ways, ranging from the novel, TV drama, movies, musicals, and so on. This instant is remembered in the spectacle musical Myeongseong, the still that you just saw. So what I'm trying to do here is in presenting and conceptualizing an emergency, a crisis, which was brought forth at the evening of the colonial modern, a state of emergency that is not declared by the modern state apparatus, but a night before it. And it connotes a primal history of modernity of Korea between empires. So this violent incident of matricide provides both traumatic and perverse fantasy, leading to the colonial modern, and during the modern times, colonial modern times, the representative figures are new women, modern girls, and the motherhood of these new women is always a suspect. And you see many kino dramas and early novels that all these stepmothers are murdered and assassinated and put to death and tried in the court and kind of, banned from coming into the modern law. The whirlwind of matricide, emergency, uprising, and the constitution of the new law came to a temporary pause when the ordinance of the prohibition of the top knot was declared in the same year of 1895. People took this ordinance as part of thanatopolitics, a politics of death. In the cutting of the top knots, an ultimate technology of thanatopolitics was French barikang, hair cutter, that you just saw in another painting, which was perceived as close to guillotine. So this is a particular kind of emergency, explosive on the threshold of the modern and the pre-modern, that would eventually find its way into perpetual states of emergency of capitalist modern statehood. And this is a kind of emergency which also needs theoretical and historical attention. And this is an emergency of a non-West country just scantily informed of modern state. And this is kind of what I'm trying to tease out. There was an uprising of literati and peasants to protest against the assassination of Empress Myeongsong, Min, Queen, but it was abruptly interrupted and disrupted and displaced by the ordinance of the prohibition of the tamnas. And people kind of ran to have their first photos, portrait photos taken to counter this Sanata politics as they perceived it. So it was colonial modern without tamnats. Hence, the primary phenomena inscribed in the threshold of modern contain the vicissitude of incidents, accidents, and events. This is a historical state of emergency before the state of emergency of modern nation state that eschews the theorization of states of emergency brought up by Carl Schmitt and so on. So, which is, as I explained, pretty much the political and theological threads of thoughts, and which has its own merits, but kind of I'm trying to deal with another chapter of the history. So one of the crucial legal and political measures, with this issue of the first female president, it deserves to look into political legacy of the first female president's father, Park Chung-hee, who declared the emergency measures 9 times from 1974 to 1975, and this was the period of Yushin Constitution. During Park's regime, the state of emergency was declared in 1971, 1979, and an expansion of emergency martial law was decreed in 1980. Despite the fact that the provisions of the Constitution was deleted in 1987, that overlaps with the case of Taiwan, many people are apprehensive of the restoration of Yushin-like Constitution, as the first female president is not only the strong man's daughter, but a political leader of the Conservative Party. Here is this presentiment of violence in the air that Domiyama Ichiro puts it, in relation to Okinawa. So one of the crucial legal and political measures which should be taken into consideration is a long reign of state of emergency, actually, that preceded the Park Chung-hee's dictatorship. Happened in 1948, and there was a civil massacre in Jeju Island in 1948. And the state of emergency was proclaimed 19 times, and security state of martial law was proclaimed 7 times during this whole period. This highly mobilized state of emergency was possible due to the partition and the Cold War, as well as a promise of prosperous post-colonial capitalist modern state out of an impoverished former colony. The state of emergency suspends the law. It suspends every moment of daily life. The suspension affects the legal and the political arena, as well as culture and daily life. During the period of capitalist modernization, this suspended mode is sustained by people's aspiration, mixed with terror, fear, anxiety, and tension, to say the least. it was also a process of torturous complicity, arguably characterized as a mass dictatorship. And, South Korea entered this neoliberal global order with the IMF crisis in 1997. And the state of emergency has kind of been transformed into effective state of emergency. That's how I would like to call it. And so you kind of see this repetition of hair cutting during the state of emergency that kind of echoes the time of 1895. And so I'll kind of conclude my speech, my talk, with sharing this photo. This created kind of enormous controversy, and it was painted by Hong Sang-dam, one of the leader of the People's Movement painting. He's a quite sophisticated painter. So I will just show his other paintings on Gwangju. So I mean, that's more usually of his style, but this kind of, he gives birth to Park Geun-hye, gives birth to his own father. And, immediately the doctor, recognized this boy, right, as Park Jung-hee, because he wears this shade and sunglasses. The sunglasses is always kind of iconic, accessory of Park Jung-hee. Because I want to kind of pause here and the kind of, with this painting and the kind of the talk I kind of tried to share with you is the kind of, I would call it a kind of Möbius strip of gendered modernity, from Matricide to reproduction of her own father, in reverse. And kind of it shows kind of very perverse and very unending kind of perpetual state of emergency that kind of has a very kind of strong gender politics, implicated in it, right? And so this is kind of modernity in suspense, and kind of this kind of very uncanny historical pairing of late 19th century and present, and kind of this is whole Bizang Abim of states of modernity placed in abyss. And kind of, partition and post-Cold War situation kind of puts this abyss into suspension. But it's not all kind of, negative, because this kind of historical pairing exposed uncanny resemblance and differences in negotiation, where the innovating mobility, preventing one from ever stopping, the impossibility of stopping, of perpetual suspension without rest. So it's also open to other possibilities. So I will end my talk here. Thank you.